Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and even better week. Want to jump straight in? A lot of times I will approach a lot of these conversations from the perspective of an organization or a team, and it is true. We are trying to diffuse transformation across the team, right? And part of that is to get you to be able to digest that, right? It should be made accessible. And all transformation, all change is more accessible and I'll say easier. Change, I think easy and all of that, that's a loaded word, right? Easy. What's easy? Nothing's easy, okay? but but it is more manageable and more digestible and perhaps easier to achieve when we do this as a team in a group versus as individuals. But as much as that is true and that there is value in that, there is just as much value in the individual realization that we have to go inside to improve anything on the outside, right? And a lot of times, what we do as human beings is we put kind of a wall, even if it's a thinly veiled wall, maybe it's plexiglass, glass, whatever, but we put a divider. Well, that's work, and that's what I do for work, and that stays over there. And, if I'm not doing work, then I'm good. But the difficulty here is that, quite honestly, none of us are good. None of us are, the completed work, right? We're all in process. We're all always growing, learning, developing. And because of that, this is why it's important, professionally or otherwise, that we do have to do an internal deep dive to be able to transform and to change and to find breakthrough and to build upon breakthroughs that we've already achieved. We can't do this by simply going, well, we're in the group, there's in the very beginning, that level is pretty achievable. You can knock heads together and do all that. But where you really start to find really interesting breakthrough is when you are actually opening your mind up, right? Opening yourself up to some of the issues, some of the challenges. It doesn't matter if it's organizational or personal or whatever it is. It could be anything, right? Anything in culture whatsoever. When you open yourself up to a thing and focus on it even gently in a quiet moment or two or whatever, you'll find that breakthrough or ideas come. I mean, how many times have you been visiting with a friend and you're talking about something and all of a sudden, what we should do is, that whole what we should do thing starts to float through. Although, isn't ironic and kind of funny too to realize that that same experience can happen to you at work. Even when you're doing that and you're not at work and it comes to you, maybe you're just blowing off steam, but in the response to that, you go, what we really should do is this, this, and this. And that's probably a fantastic idea. You write that down, right? Take it with you to work on Monday, whatever it is. And because if it's coming to you, there's probably legitimacy in it, or a piece of it, right? Maybe not the blown off steam part, but what follows. Because we can't just stop at blowing off steam and thinking, oh, well, everything is bunk and this and that and this and that. Because then what happens is when we devalue it, and we don't want to devalue things, right? We want to build upon the value, whether that be organizationally or in our own lives. So if we are constantly devaluing a thing, then what happens is that our actions and our words and everything else tend to follow that energy. And then you will start to work in such a way, and it's super subtle and it's super, subconscious, but you'll start to devalue the things that kind of mattered. Over time, they kind of don't. And you'll start taking things for granted. This is why I say to build and to grow and to thrive requires us to go inside, right? There's the synergy we get as a team, when we're in organizations or on our teams or our friend groups or families and all these things, right? Just call all of those their individual teams if you want. Your churches, your civic organizations, all these things. There is a synergy that comes from that, and that can be a very amazing and beautiful thing when you have that synergy, when you set yourself up for success. But here's the thing. In the United States, as I mentioned in previous videos, we're no better than 71% effective, right? We've already established that we've got probably almost 7 trillion laying on the table in waste, and that's all human-based waste, not, material necessarily. So when you think of that, okay, where did your pay raise go? Where did your this go? Where did your that go? Why did the company fold, right? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Da, 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 da. Right on down the line, it doesn't matter if you're the leader or the newest employee to the organization or where you are in culture. It doesn't matter, family, it doesn't matter what group you're a part of. We're all either improving upon that or we are aiding in its continuation, right? And statistically speaking, that's organizationally, that statistic, that 71%, is probably more in the 60s. And what I've noticed is it kind of follows the Fibonacci, the golden ratio, really. If you just went in and did stuff at work and just kind of generally, I wouldn't say you did great, but you just kind of went in and did your thing, you're probably treading right on the Fibonacci at 62-ish%, right? Effectiveness. If you kind of try, the organization kind of does this and kind of does that, but keeping in mind, this is removing all the gimmicks, tax write-offs, all the things, right? You're probably not really doing much better than 62%. You really have to make an effort to exceed that. Now, there are organizations who on paper look like they're 90, 95. They're not, because they're using what? Gimmickry. They're using strategic layoffs, all these things. That is not what a healthy organizational culture does, okay? And because of that, they can be perceived as, well, we're this and we're that. But anybody that does even like a basic math elemental digging into some of this stuff will find that those are all inflated numbers. But the ones that they have to report, those are the ones I'm telling you about. 71%, no better than 71% effective. Just think about that. Now, that's at work. We have eyes on each other. We have eyes on our teams. We have eyes on our leadership teams. We have eyes on all the employees. Everybody's seeing what we do. The customers seeing, not moment to moment, but then generally they're seeing what our output is, right? Quality of our work, all that stuff. Now, get away from work. Do you think that number is going to go up when there's less, drive to ensure quality? No. What does that mean? That means we're probably right at that Fibonacci golden ratio number of about like 61, 62%. That's about how we are when we kind of just generally do stuff. But when we make an effort, when we actually synergize, when we actually slow down, and this is why I'm bringing it up, when we slow down and synergize and we start looking inward and we start assessing, okay, what are some areas? Oh, well, you know what? I could get a little more fit so that I'm healthier, and then I do that. I could eat a little bit better. I could make some subtle, small changes, right? And I can make all these subtle, small changes over time, and then I feel better, I perform better, I recover better, my attitude is better, right? Because if attitude is a choice, it really is kind of being driven off of how you feel. You're not feeling well if you're not treating yourself well, right? Go inside to change the outside. Change, update your diet. Doesn't mean you got to make drastic changes all in one day. Let's not be ridiculous. Be healthy, be smart. If you need to get a dietitian, do it. If you want to go to the doctor to get, to XYZ, all this stuff, do it. Do what you feel you need to do. That is on you. But you have to, right, go inside to change the outside. If my mindset is off and my attitude is bad, I need to what? Have a greater understanding. If I have a greater understanding of what my physiology is, even if I don't go outside to anybody, I can learn a lot about things on my own, right? Nowadays, the gift of technology is knowledge right at hand that my generation didn't have in the first, 25-ish, say 25, 30 years of their life. We didn't really have it as accessible as it is relevant now, as it is accessible now. So the ability to go in and make changes and to tweak things and to improve upon, and I could, if I want to download a fitness app, if I want to learn a thing, if I want to take a class, if I want to watch a podcast, if I want to find a video about how to build a swimming pool or to XYZ, pick a number, right? Whatever it is, you can do it. But that requires what? To go in, to improve everything on the outside. Nothing on the outside changes if you don't first go in. I mean, if you think about it, that's true. Your kids are arguing. They're teenagers. I'm just using this because all my kids are grown now, but when they were teenagers, you know how teenagers will pester one another and all that stuff. Well, you have to go inside to assess what you're seeing, what they're doing, all these things before you go out, outside of yourself to mentor them and how you're going to mentor them, right? Okay, what's the lesson we need to do here? Sometimes it's just to dictate, hey, there will be peace. Let's start with that. And here's why, right? It's fine to lay down parameters and boundaries. It's fine to mentor and develop and all these things, but you got to go inside first. Before you go out and start mentoring your team and working with your team, you better take the time to build some notes and build a bit of a breakdown of what is happening, what you need to address, open it up to input. You've got to really come at this at 360 degrees. And speaking organizationally, could be your home, could be any organization you're affiliated with outside of work, whatever groups you're involved with. But you gotta go inside before you can go outside. And that's the same way that sometimes this is why we have to kind of adjourn some of our meeting stuff and say, okay, all right, I want you guys to, and then give ourselves an assignment. Hey, next week when we come together, between now and then, I want you guys to ponder, hey, how are some ways we can do this or that, right? And and we'll talk about it next time, right? So these are the things you can do. Now you can apply that to any group that you're involved with, right? Go inside before you can then improve everything on the outside. It doesn't mean that you can't make, quick things and do some quick things, around that are obvious. That isn't to say that you can't do that. But again, you're going inside, you're just doing it in a quicker way. Some of those things are low-hanging fruit. I'm talking about not necessarily the lowest hanging obvious fruit. Obviously, if it's that obvious, you're going to be able to knock that out pretty quick. But some of that stuff is a little more subtle, a little more embedded when you're dealing with personnel conflicts. If you're dealing with scheduling issues, you're dealing with all kinds of things, right? Resource issues, things that require a little more massaging, a little more, surgical approach. You don't just run in there and start, blasting away. You need to be able to take the time and to go in, come up with a plan. But you also need to, confer with your team, right? Because part of that synergy is working together. So there's a step that we can do on our own, right? We can think it through And as individual team members, we can go in and think things through to a great level before we even really have to get together with the team. Because if you're coming together with your team and you don't have at least 2 or 3 ideas, even if they're just kind of, off the cuff, okay. I mean, they don't have to be super winners, but the little piece that you bring and a little piece that somebody else brings and somebody else brings, and guess what? The little bits of genius that you are bringing to the table is going to turn into one genius plan potentially when you guys get done, right? When all of you get done, synergizing that energy and that ideas and that brainstorming and all those things together from your going inward first as individuals, then that can really turn into something special. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about synergy. I wanted you to also to reflect on how you are in a team in your organization. How are you in a team with your friend group or your civic organizations or your church or your families and all these things. Assess, do a little internal reflection. Hey, how can I contribute in a special way that'll make a difference, or there's a thing that we need to overcome here and nobody wants to bring it up, but I really need to bring it up, but I need to figure out a really smart way to bring this up so that we can have the most productive outcome, because I obviously don't want to create more conflict, right? The goal is not to create conflict. The goal is to create more harmony. Okay, more harmony, and then through that harmony of cooperation, then we turn that into productivity, right? The result of staying on a harmonious path of working together and cooperating means that we don't ruin the sovereignty of each other. Remember I've talked to before about protecting love. It's in the book. But you're here to protect love, but you're also here to protect sovereignty of everyone, to have their own, to be respected in who they are. And if we aren't respecting that sovereignty, then we don't deserve to have our own sovereignty and our own love protected. So it's a two-way street, and we have to recognize it's a two-way street. And when we stop recognizing it's a two-way street, guess what? That's when we find ourselves in a ditch, and we're trying to figure out how to get out of the mud, because then we start dividing and subdividing and subverting, relationships of all types, all sizes, and all manner. And that doesn't honor anyone. So we don't want to dishonor anyone. We want to honor folks. We want to honor ourselves, and we want to be respectful of others and respectful of ourselves. Because once we lose that, we've lost a lot. So, all right, folks, just wanted to talk to you today about synergy. This will be called Synergy Part 2. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage folks. And when you do that, not only you're helping to guide them toward a more thriving future, but you're helping to improve your own life as well. And that's an amazing thing. And don't take it for granted. All right, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.